Rust covered every inch of it. Tucked behind a stack of old furniture in the back corner of the barn, the tractor looked more like scrap metal than machinery. Tires flat, engine seized, paint long gone. A handwritten tag hung from the steering wheel. $1. Yes, this really happened. A 22-year-old walked into a Texas estate sale, spotted that tractor, and paid exactly $1 for it. Nobody at that sale, including him, had any idea what he'd just picked up. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching this from. Tyler wasn't even planning to buy anything that Saturday. A friend had dragged him along to the estate sale, promising good deals on tools and furniture from an elderly farmer's property that had sat untouched for years after his passing. 22 years old, working part-time at a hardware store, Tyler had a habit of picking up broken things at yard sales: old radios, busted lawnmowers, anything he could tinker with and maybe resell for a small profit on the weekends. Walking past rows of dressers and kitchenware, something in the back of the barn caught his eye. The tractor sat half buried under a dusty tarp, clearly forgotten, clearly not something the estate sale organizers expected anyone to want. Most buyers were circling the antique dishware and the vintage rifle collection near the front. Nobody was paying this rusted-out machine any attention at all. Curiosity pulled him closer. Kneeling down to inspect it, he ran his hand along the frame, checked the tires, and peered at the faded lettering on the side panel. Most of the paint had worn away decades ago, but a partial serial number was still visible, stamped into the metal near the engine block. He didn't recognize the model, didn't recognize the manufacturer's mark, and honestly didn't think much of it beyond this could be a fun weekend project. When he asked the estate sale worker about it, she barely looked up from her clipboard. "Take it for $1, she said. "Nobody's going to want to haul that thing away anyway." He paid on the spot, borrowed a trailer from his friend's truck, and spent the next hour wrestling the dead weight of rusted steel up a set of ramps. Getting it home that evening, Tyler backed the trailer into his driveway and finally got a proper look at the tractor under better lighting. That's when something struck him as off. The proportions didn't match any tractor he'd seen before. The engine housing was oddly compact. The seat design looked older than the rest of the frame, and that partial serial number kept nagging at him. Grabbing his phone, he snapped a few close-up photos of the markings and the frame before heading inside for the night, planning to look into it more the next morning. He had no idea that photo was about to lead him somewhere he never expected. Morning came, and Tyler sat down with his coffee and those photos still open on his phone. Typing the partial serial number into a few vintage tractor forums, he expected maybe a rough manufacture date, nothing more. Instead, 3 separate replies came back within the hour, all saying some version of the same thing. That number sequence didn't match any common production model they recognized. One forum user, a longtime collector from Ohio, asked him to post more photos, specifically close-ups of the engine housing and the seat mounting bracket. Something about his description had clearly caught this person's attention in a way Tyler didn't fully understand yet. He climbed back into the driveway with his phone, wiped down the grime from a few key spots, and uploaded a fresh batch of pictures. Before we get into what that collector found, hit subscribe, because what happened over the next 24 hours turned a dollar tractor into something this 22-year-old never saw coming. The collector's response came fast, and it wasn't casual anymore. He asked Tyler point blank, was he sure this tractor came from an old Texas farm estate, and did he know anything about the original owner's history? Tyler didn't, not really, just that the farmer who'd owned the property had passed away in his 90s after living there his whole life. That detail seemed to matter. The collector explained that a handful of experimental tractor models had been produced in extremely limited numbers decades ago, tested briefly on private farms before certain manufacturers scrapped the line entirely. Records on these units were scarce, mostly because so few had ever left factory testing grounds, and even fewer had survived this long without being melted down for parts. Tyler sat in his driveway staring at the phone, still not entirely convinced this wasn't some exaggerated internet rabbit hole. But the collector wasn't done. He asked for one more photo, a specific spot underneath the frame near the rear axle, an area most casual buyers would never think to check. Crouching down with a flashlight, Tyler found it. A small stamped plate, nearly invisible under decades of rust and grime, with a manufacturer's mark he'd never seen mentioned anywhere in his earlier searches. He photographed it and sent it off, half expecting another polite, interesting find reply. Instead, his phone rang. It was the collector, and his first words were, "You need to sit down for this." Sitting on his tailgate, phone pressed to his ear, Tyler listened as the collector laid it all out. That stamped plate matched one of fewer than a dozen prototype units ever produced by a manufacturer that had shut down its experimental farm equipment division after a failed product launch decades earlier. Most of those units, as far as records showed, had either been dismantled for scrap or simply vanished after the factory closed its doors. No auction records, no museum acquisitions, nothing. As far as anyone in the collector world knows, the man said, there are only 2 of these confirmed to still exist. One's sitting in a private museum in the Midwest. The other one might be in your driveway right now. Tyler didn't say anything for a moment. He just stared at the rusted frame sitting on his trailer, the same tractor he'd hauled home for $1 less than 18 hours earlier. The collector kept going, explaining that prototype farm equipment from that era carried a unique kind of value not because of horsepower or function, but because of scarcity and documented history. Serious collectors didn't just want old machines, they wanted pieces that told a story about a manufacturer's failed experiments, the roads not taken in industrial history. A verified, surviving prototype like this one, even in rough condition, could draw serious interest from private collectors and even institutional buyers. Then came the number. Based on recent private sales of comparable prototype-era equipment and accounting for the rarity of this specific model, the collector estimated Tyler's tractor could be worth somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000, possibly more, once fully authenticated and restored. $40,000 to $60,000 for a machine he'd bought for $1, sitting behind a stack of furniture nobody else had bothered to look twice at. Tyler asked the obvious question. Was the collector certain? The answer was careful but confident. Nothing is ever guaranteed until a piece goes through full authentication with manufacturer records and metallurgical testing, but the serial number, the stamped plate, and the physical characteristics all lined up with everything documented about this specific prototype line. In 30 years of collecting, the man said, he'd only ever heard rumors of a third surviving unit. He never expected someone to call him about finding one in a barn. For the first time since loading it onto the trailer, Tyler looked at the tractor differently. It wasn't scrap metal anymore. It wasn't a weekend project. It was a piece of manufacturing history that had somehow survived decades of neglect, $1, and an estate sale worker who just wanted it gone. Word moves fast in collector circles, and within days of that phone call, Tyler had 3 more specialists reaching out, all wanting to see the tractor in person before anyone talked numbers publicly. He made a decision most people in his position wouldn't have. Instead of rushing to sell, he agreed to send the tractor for full authentication first, working with a small team who specialized in restoring prototype-era farm equipment. Weeks of research followed. Metallurgical testing confirmed the frame's composition matched factory specifications from the correct era. Archival records, pulled from old manufacturer patent filings, matched the stamped plate almost exactly. Piece by piece, what started as a hunch from an online forum became a fully documented, verified prototype, one of, at most, 3 known to still exist anywhere in the world. News of the find eventually reached beyond collector forums. A regional news outlet picked up the story, and from there it spread the way stories like this always do. A 22-year-old, a dollar bill, and a machine sitting quietly in a Texas barn for who knows how many decades, waiting for someone to actually look at it closely. Tyler ultimately chose to restore the tractor rather than sell it immediately, working with the same specialists to bring it back to a display-ready condition while preserving its original components wherever possible. Early estimates on the fully restored, authenticated piece climbed well past that initial $40,000 to $60,000 range, with serious private collectors already expressing interest in acquiring it outright. What sticks with people about this story isn't just the number, it's how close it came to never happening at all. If Tyler had walked past that tarp-covered shape in the back of the barn, if he'd skipped the photos, if that Ohio collector hadn't taken the time to ask a few extra questions, that tractor likely sits in a scrapyard within the year, its history erased along with it. Estate sales are full of moments like this, hiding in plain sight behind dressers and dishware, priced by people who have no idea what they're actually looking at. Most of the time, nothing comes of a hunch like Tyler's. This time, $1 and a little curiosity uncovered a piece of history nobody expected to find. $1. One overlooked tractor. One phone call that changed everything. Tyler's story proves the next big find could be sitting in a barn nobody's checked in years. If this story surprised you, subscribe for more real discoveries where ordinary people stumbled onto extraordinary finds.